Toby Marsden. Welcome to the show, Toby. How's it going?
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, great to be with you. It's all good. Very cold here in the UK, though, but yeah, looking to warm it up with some talk today. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's get into it because you're in Japan next week, right?
I am, yeah. I've got a trip to Tokyo next week to go and see some of our strategic partners. So, yeah, it's going to be fun.
Well, that's why I threw the title in there around digital excellence, right? Because I know you've been working with IDC around putting together a new brief around digital excellence and how to achieve that. So, it'd be a great topic to talk about, maybe share some of your thoughts about what you're going to be discussing in Tokyo next week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's as you say, always interesting to look at what's happening in the market. And I think you and I have worked together for many years, and the whole testing and QA of space just continues to move forward. So, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff we'll be talking about with the partners there, and obviously, as you say, we've been working with IDC to try and research the market recently. Where we've gone out and we've looked at IT decision makers and operational decision makers across North America and Europe to really look at what is stopping and the barriers to how do we improve the way that we test, but obviously same time, how do we improve that QA dynamic working with the business? And like I say, you and I first met 20 years ago when we were working together, and I still don't think we've quite solved it. I don't think we're quite there yet. There's still a lot of great stuff happening, but is it really delivering what the business wants from a testing and QA perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We probably when we kind of first started talking about this, these were the Mercury days, right? Where QA was its own tranche and it was very siloed. It was an activity. Those products and tools that were really designed just for that one activity, right? And not really a kind of an overall view of what does that actually mean across that organizational wide scaling quality across the organization viewpoint. And I think this is what I thought took away from the report really was that, we're not completely there yet, or even maybe we're 40% of the way of where we need to be. I know we were both in last year, we were touring with Diego, and he just said the same figures as we'd seen back in the 90s, right? 20% coverage of automation, testing still not being able to keep up with the pace of delivery. We've been talking about multimodal kind of operational models for a long time and how to scale this to become enterprise wide, but really there isn't a solution. This kind of just everyone's going at it with their own kind of successes and failures, and maybe we're still suffering from that. We're suffering from large scale implementations and quality and 100%. Ownership of quality.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at that by dynamic, it goes back to, like you say, the Mercury days, Jonathan. I think one of the things that we got, and we're learning, right? This is a very a new market and a new thing that we do. I mean, IT in its own right really isn't been around that long, 50 years of proper enterprise computing probably. And we're still learning, we're still understanding the business. But one of the things I think we got quite wrong in those early days of when we worked together was there's a lot of governance and standards and central organizations that you must do it the way that I want to do it. And as you say, when you look across that, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get products to market faster in the best way. And what does the best way mean? It means probably the lowest cost, but best outcome, but the highest quality. And when we did it in the old days of building these big organizational structures of COEs and everything else, that testing all goes through that central organization and no one else must do it, it missed out business, development, operations, users, etc. And you're kind of going, it was done for the right reasons. It was all done for the right reasons, but it didn't really help to solve the problem. It helped to fix standards, governance. It helped to fix skills, because you had a centralized skills capability, but didn't really help to do what's important. And what's really important is that we deliver IT applications and systems in the fastest most quality and cost-effective manner.
Yeah, and I think that's the infinite triangle, right? Cost, speed, and quality, right? You can choose two, you can't have all three, right? It's always that kind of view, and we've seen IT being a cost center really meant that every year, it was all about operational efficiency, it was about reducing costs, it was increasing speed. All these dimensions had an effect, and I think part of it didn't really give you the overall holistic viewpoint of how do you manage that at scale, right? And there's teams and teams of teams. These are huge and complex risk, resilience, failure. To your damage to your brand. Yesterday I was talking a little bit with Paul Gerard around the post office kind of current issue, right? In large government systems, and we've all been there. We've seen the difference between core IT and fluid IT in the old days, where we're saying, okay, how do we, help move from, in essence, that 60% of core IT, 30%, fluid IT, where you're starting to take on agile and DevOps methodologies, and then this 10% fail fast, learn rapid kind of new wave of doing things. Kind of what I'm doing in the lab at the moment is fail fast, learn, quick experiments. We've seen the traditional IT infrastructure being split out to IT service management, running and maintaining, keeping the lights on, not really being there for innovation and speed, but really around secure and safe kind of things. And then we've tried to bring everyone on that journey to move them all to a single modal kind of approach, which is very fast, very DevOps, very site reliability engineering, chaos engineering. Some of these aspirational models that might work with some large, well-known companies, but don't work for everyone. And then this, like you said, the shift from center of excellence and a central governance system to center of enablement, enabling the rest of the organization wide to adopt good principles and practices, right? And we were on site with a well-known automotive customer, last week, right? And they said to us, we've got 6 departments, 40 projects in each one of those departments, all running simultaneously, all with this operational governance around digital excellence, right? Should we say for a second, which is hard to quantify. And then you've got skills with different levels of skills, different levels of maturity, different levels of complexity, ranging from autonomous vehicles and the next generation of EV technologies to maybe some more of the PLM traditional landscape that's still using headsets, right? So I think we were there talking about one of our systems we'd implemented, and they're using XR devices in the PLM manufacturing process, right? So lots of very complex areas, and then the traditional kind of IT core IT application estates. I know the report kind of really focuses on this kind of narrow kind of view of, I suppose, the success, that 20% success we've had in automation, very much on the, I'm going to call it low-hanging fruit, but, the web-based systems. We've moved now into more complex systems, NASA shuttle launch, kind of these really kind of systems that require, human validation. So, again, another automotive customer of ours, we were, validating, at high speed, you're turning into a corner on a track. Can you, from a human computer interaction, see all of the different IVI systems? The customer we went to see actually has an infotainment system that if you look at it from one direction, you get your heads up display, cockpit, Apple CarPlay kind of landscape. You look at it from another, you see your infotainment, video streaming kind of, things. So, multi dimensions of complex digital experiences. You can kind of understand why, people have just gone after the low hanging. Oh, has it got a web page?
100%.
Use Selenium, right?
Well, this is the thing I've always said, isn't it? It is, if you go back, probably when you and I first met, maybe a bit before. What was the environment? The environment was probably mainframe applications, client server, thick client systems, and you were just seeing the rise of web, right? And the platform and the environment that you were testing was a lot simpler, right? Yeah, even in the web-based systems, you were talking about Windows, no one really used Mac operating systems, unless you were some sort of a digital designer at that point, right? But it was all Windows with an Internet Explorer browser, right? The business environment we work in today is crazy, right? It's IoT, it's digital system. It's like you say, we're starting to move into all of these next generation platforms and capabilities where, from a testing perspective, you can't blame the testing team. The environment they've got to support now is just crazy. We built systems, early systems, to help people to run business process. So the user bent to the system, right? You designed a workflow, the user used the workflow, and you had to follow the system workflow. And if you didn't, you were stupid, right? These modern environments that we're looking at, the customer facing, the user at the center, the system bends to the user. You don't know whether I'm going to log in from my mobile phone and Amazon Alexa, my car, whatever it's going to be in these modern interactions. And then the platform and the technology's got crazy as well, where this is really hard. This isn't something that is a simple problem to solve. It never was a completely simple problem to solve, but it's now even infinitely worse, right, in terms of the scenarios and things we've got to do. So it's back to that point: is how do you, and I, me, and I've been a big advocate of the Agile and the DevOps movements over the years, and how do you really understand that? And I think what DevOps to me and Agile was trying to do was trying to move the outcome closer to the business, to the user. Because what's the business? It really is the user, whether it's an internal or external application, right? You want to build something because you either want to build something that helps you do something better, so automate an internal process. You want to do something that helps you drive compliance, but you're automating something. You're automating something for a user, or you're trying to release something new. You're trying to attract external users into your company through innovation, through modern kind of approaches, through things that they're going to work with. If you start to release systems that are specific and tell the user that they're the ones that don't understand what you're supposed to be doing anymore, you've failed as a business. You've failed as a product owner. So that dynamic is really, really hard to manage. It's not something that we can criticize, because it is so difficult to build. And I think there's a gap feeling for a while. There's always been a gap between IT and the business, in terms of IT talks in its own language and the business talks in his language. And are they really working together to help to drive what the outcome should be, which would be better customer engagement or better employee productivity? And that's the dynamic. So we've still got a long way to go to break down those walls. Agile went a way towards it, but did it really fix the business planning, the business interaction cycle? No, it really helped the development team iterate and deliver value more continuously. In some dynamics got better. DevOps was trying to extend that further to ensure that we didn't just think about building something, we actually thought about putting it in production at the same time. So we were trying to make the production loop more agile at the same time. How do we quickly get it into production and focus on what's right? But we don't think we've ever really solved this, this enterprise app lifecycle challenge yet. And I think we're all trying different techniques, different tools, different things, but we've still got to get a focus on what's important. And I think that's where I see it at the moment. We're a long way to go to really fix that end-to-end cycle. And I don't, if you remember, about 10 years ago, I started to reference things like Deming's total quality management kind of scenarios, where the manufacturing plants in the automotive industry kind of got it right. They went from this kind of very manual thing with all these different stages of activity happening, but no one really collaborating, to collaborating across that life cycle. But even now in that automotive space, and as we see with some of the clients today, are we able to then say, rather than what Ford said back in the 1920s, yeah, you can order anything as long as it's black, and it's a Model T in black. Now, can it be different colors? Can it have all these different scopes, these specs, these etc.? And I think we're getting there. IT's got that way to go to really kind of industrialize the process of software release and software manufacturing. and bringing it much more closely aligned to the user requirement and the expectations of the business. And I think we're getting there, but we're not. You know, there's a way to go. You know, we're not as automated as we should be. We're not as integrated as we should be, etc. So
yeah, I think you've just added kind of, you know, something we've been talking about for a while, right? Which is this kind of this ATA vision, this automated test assurance vision, right? Is that, you know, I know we've talked even maybe 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about this executive scorecard kind of level. You know, you see risk, you mitigate risk by spending money, time, effort, whatever it may be to help and understand organizationally wide what the challenges are, right? And, you know, dashboards and things like that. And it maybe was a bit of a pipe dream. You know, we saw the introduction of value stream management, which again is exactly what you're talking about, understanding where the value and how that flows, or flow as a kind of an organizational wide, another book to kind of talk about, you know, how you can improve that. And then, you know, I think you've kind of brought up a really good point still, is that maybe, you know, IT is still an enabler and a cost center, and it's not fully integrated into the business. Then actually the factory models and, you know, agile and DevOps have still been IT wide. They've not opened up to the business. You know, we used to see IT for IT. You know, we'd see ITIL, you know, SAFE, very much focused on trying to improve that, but did they really penetrate through? And, you know, if you were thinking from a quality stream management perspective of understanding all of this information that's happening around risk and insight that you need for an organization to keep up at the speed it does. And I think this was kind of, it wasn't just COVID, this was the digital transformation age, where we were kind of saying, well, actually, you know, if it takes you 14 months to respond to a competitor who's bringing something net new to the into the industry, then, you know, that pivot could cost you a large amount when it talks about customer and revenue, right? And even agility, right? Yeah. And, you know, it's not saying that we all have to be able to release at X amount of times a day, but I think what we're talking about is the touch points and interaction period between customers or users, right? And I think that may be where this has kind of gone a little bit, again, siloed. You know, we're getting this information, operational information coming in from service, incident management. I'm going to go back to the post office example for a second. They have thousands and tens of thousands of calls into their service management, incident management systems, telling them there was something wrong. However, that never got to the point where it fed back into what is, in essence, a run the post office kind of entity versus a build net new project. We had this kind of this external entities where we started pushing. It was cheaper to do work offshore, so let's move those into people bidding very aggressively to reduce costs, operational costs. And really focus on, you know, shipping out some of that development and even, you know, the operational work. And I don't know if we've ever brought all that back in, because there's a certain level of trustworthiness of, you know, if I'm giving you some information, the dashboard's green, then it's red, you know, that's not the level of trust which you want. You want to be able to pass that information and provide insurance around it and make decisions, actionable decisions that say, you know, based on the information I've got, we may have a problem here, right? And I think a lot of people who have got this pressure on the back of their shoulders, where they're not sure whether or not a system that they've released into is fit for purpose, right? And a lot more pressure on minimum viable product, getting the product into people's hands, at maybe not overseeing the quality engineering blueprints that, you know, we should be adopting, to be able to push back with the evidence that we need to say, look, you know, pull the cord, this should not be happening, right? And I think that's where I kind of feel we are, is that this is, again, you know, the IT's, you know, becoming its own island away from the business that really cares about this, right? They care about their customers, they care about their operational, you know, agility that gives them the ability to bring something to market to delight their customers, and then also be able to respond to, you know, environmental or, you know, demands, time sensitive demands from their customers for incidents that are happening in the real world. And they need it, but, you know, maybe they're losing more and more confidence in IT's ability to deliver, right? And I think that's where I feel like we've got to, but then we've got the magical kind of question to say some of that is a testing activity.
Well, it's back to, like you say, it's things like, do we view QA and testing as a enabler, or do we see it as a cost and just a necessity, right? And you've put a few terms out there that you and I have talked about a lot, is quality engineering for starters. So you can't just test at the end of doing something and expect it to all go right. You have to engineer the process of quality into your delivery stream. To your point as well, is QA and testing a critical enabler? Yes, but we've seen it too much as we've just got to do it kind of exercise, right? We're in that, it's a necessity and we must do it because the business is asking for quality. Where actually, if you start engineering it in, it becomes an enabler, it becomes a critical role in enabling your business to do things faster. And I think, you again, looking at some of the terms you kind of put out there as well, ITIL and SAFe and, all these different things. Did they really address the quality conundrum? Because I can tell you, when I was working with the guys around the Open Group IFE to IT standards, we were having a lot of discussion there around, well, change is risk and we want to lock down change and make it more stable. Or actually, if we embedded testing and quality engineering into that ITIL kind of fabric, the IT for IT fabric, then we would have been better. Now, that's evolved massively, right? I'm talking back to ITIL version 2 and 3, and we're now further down the line. So say we are constantly trying to evolve and improve, but are we there? And are we seeing QA and testing as an enabler, embedding it in the regular processes and driving it? I don't think we're there yet. The research that we've kind of driven is, we're not there yet. Are people completely there? Well, the research showed us that about 50% of people agree that it is an enabler. But if only 50% of people agree, that's a lot of people that don't, right? It's kind of, so how do we do that? How do we kind of evolve it? How do we continue to build on what we've been driving? I think is a critical point for the future. Yeah.
And moving the future forward, obviously, we're always excited about talking about new stuff. And as you know, the reason why I've been locked in a cage for the last couple of quarters is we've been doing a whole stuff around AI augmented testing, right? Which is at the moment the top of the Gartner wave for software development, right? Software engineering. Mm-hmm. And this is very much centered around people, right? And I think this is the interesting thing, is the human in the loop aspect of how do you do more with less? This is the pressure that everyone is under every day. But actually, how do you share knowledge, right? And I think, you've been a big advocate, even from kind of the start of your career at Cast and organizations like that, is that actually shared knowledge is really important, right? Part of a shared understanding and also feedback loop is essential. And that's where, the UML side of things started coming in the early 90s. And then you've kind of got to this point where modeling and understanding system design and then getting the business architectural kind of blueprints, a lot of that kind of disappeared, right? You kind of got what we used to laugh about throwing things over the wall with the deployment team, is it's that same thing with the business now. You kind of got this, I'm able to do a post-agile shape methodology where we all sit down in a funky on beanbags and talk about, what I envision my application to look like. And then the next thing is it all, reaches to the same, well, what's the latest technology of, capability? Oh, well, we'll do a blockchain, or we'll do a crypto app, or we'll do, it gets to that point, which is what's going to look great on my CV. It's not a sensible, well, what's going to be there and built to last for 20, 30 years, or does it need to even last for 30 years? I think the conversations and the frequency and the share of knowledge is probably, is partially reduced. And then, I think now we're looking at technologies like generative AI, and we're saying to ourselves, is there any valid use cases within quality engineering where actually having human augmentation and an augmented intelligence could be really powerful? It could help assist people and fill in some of those knowledge gaps. And, I say this as maybe the future of knowledge workers is you think of a post-agile kind of team. These teams sometimes have satellited people dropping in who don't have full understanding. We've grown up with single points of failure, who've know the system inside out. How can you be a knowledge worker without consuming huge amounts of information about incredibly complex systems? And I think this is where AI augmented testing could potentially enable human augmentation of intelligence that would maybe give us a chance to fill in some of these blanks that we've had from, I'm not going to call it bad requirements, but I'm going to call it about maybe communication issues throughout the last 3 decades.
No, look, as you say, it's just kind of weird across my career where I've gone from system design to requirements to system, all these different things, and into testing, QA, and release, and everything else. And absolutely, I think one of the things that everyone got freaked out with the early days of UML and DSDM kind of principles, etc., was we spent far too long in the design phase and analyzing and designing a system, and nothing was written. And by the time we'd written some code and released something, the business had moved on and they didn't want what we were writing anyway, right? Now, there's some systems, don't get me wrong, that need that level of rigor, right? You absolutely wouldn't want to design a system in an airplane that's going to control it falling out of the sky, or something that's going to potentially do something that people get injured without that level of rigor. So there's a level of rigor and stuff we've got to do. But in that kind of modern system where we're talking about, interfacing with users and doing things quickly and making things more modern, etc., that wouldn't work, right? So that principle's there. And, we did some, that was great. And it was hard because once you'd gone from modeling to then actually releasing code, your model was out of step with the code, and it was all a mess. And how are you going to update what the business wants? And then you've talked about requirements. Are we really defining requirements that the rest of the teams in the end-to-end chain can utilize, right? You're writing something down over here, but then you go, and we've tried to solve those with Gherkin and BDD and TDD techniques, etc. But we're still at that point, right? So, and like you say, where do I think Gen AI can really help? Now, what I was surprised at with DevOps, and this is one of the things, is like, we're going to suddenly create this mythical unicorn of a person that understands the business and really understands the technical nature of how to do the implementation and testing and everything else. And there may be a few out there, really highly paid developers in certain areas that kind of get it. But the reality is they're not there. They're either a specialist in the business, or they're a specialist in the technical nature of how you deliver and implement applications. So I think, like you say, I think where there's a real opportunity for Gen AI and like you've been working on, is how do you actually bridge the gap between them? How do you provide domain expertise that translates both sides and enables people on both sides of that equation to collaborate more effectively and work effectively? Because you get that right, then you're suddenly in a game-changing world, right? You're suddenly in a scenario where you can, that tool, that thing, or that product, or whatever you want to call it, can help to the business people do things better their side. It can help take what the business is doing and translate it to the technical side and help them do it as well. And you get that right, then you suddenly start to break down some of the I think one of the big barriers with, we talk shift left for years, you and I, right? Let's shift it left, but how far left did we get? Well, we maybe got into the early part of the dev phase, but did we really get into the business analysis and designing phase? No, but I think you've talked, you and I talked very at length about it. I've always advocated just testing the requirements, testing the business requirements and workflows to understand, do they make sense? Would they ever be able to be implementable? Should we maybe change those things? And I think we're getting to that point where if we can shift again another step left, the benefits of doing that are going to be groundbreaking in any business. Is how do you translate the subject matter of the business into something the IT and the technical teams can take to be able to build that into something that can be put into an automation scenario and really help to speed up that chain, that pipeline of stuff that's always going to flow through from here to here, right? and bringing that together, I think is going to be game changing. I really do. I think the benefits and the ROI and the returns that people will get from doing that will just be overwhelming for most people, because that's where you see all of these kind of complaints coming in today. Is you sort of go, well, it's never fast enough, or it didn't quite deliver on what I said, or you guys spent too much money, or it's all and you kind of look at it going, this is hard, guys. This is really hard, because you're translating what people in the business are talking about to how IT can support you. Now, back to engineering and QA, if you can bring those guys right into the heart of it, why would you do that? Because you're unifying the user experience at the start of the process. Because that's what QA and testing is trying to do. It's trying to take into account you and me as a user and how we would benefit from functional, performance, security aspects within our systems. It's really taking that user into account. That's why dev teams kind of hate QA sometimes, because they're kind of going, well, you're just trying to break it. Going, we're not trying to break it. We're trying to put it into the real world scenario over here, and we're trying to test it in that manner. And I think that's where we've got to go. Great that we've got kind of that functional level and the unit level and stuff happening to make sure we're not producing bad code, but we've got to elevate up now. We've got to go to a process level, a business outcome level, a user level, and we've got to try and connect the dots. And I always hate, everyone tells me to stop using the analogy of a V model, right? But I always looked at it as dev to outcomes down here, code to does it work, but what's the business requirement up here to the user requirement up here, and how do you connect those dots? Now, using the analogy of a V model, I'll get shot again, because people in the agile DevOps world will go, Toby, that's legacy, it's waterfall, stop using that analogy. And like you say, with what we've done, is what we really did, you and I looking at that ATA messaging, was flipped it on its head and said, actually, the top outcome for the ATA, the automation test assurance, is business to business connection points. And then you've got those technology connection points. So I think huge opportunity here to connect that back and shift it even further left with a business understanding using AI, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's a good place to kind of talk about the report. And, they talk about value-based testing and all the kind of great stuff that you can check out on that. But, I just want to kind of summarize what you said, because I think it's really powerful in the sense of shifting very left, call it for a second. Obviously I kind of started talking about shift right. I wasn't the massive advocate for shift left, because I did see it stop in that kind of S-dead landscape.
Yeah.
Stop dead in S-dead, it rhymes. But, part of it is we saw that like literally last week when we were on site with a large automotive customer. They're talking about they weren't advocating for an S-dead kind of technical resource that was there testing at that level. They were talking about testing much earlier in the life cycle, like you said, to the business level, and then also the business validation or test for business testing. But then bringing in that shared understanding between those people. And I think partly what you're talking about, and it's kind of where we started with what we were previously calling the synthetic domain expert, was normalizing the language between these different stakeholders, right? So you've got the business stakeholder here who maybe doesn't understand what Kafka is, right?
Yep.
And maybe they don't see the benefit of, or the challenge from an operational perspective of putting that into different geo locations and challenges around deployment. There's multi-dimensional facets, but in essence, they need to all have a shared understanding, a shared model, shared kind of vision of what's going to happen. Now, we've been talking probably the last 5 years since you've been at Eggplant around digital twins, right? Create a digital twin, and what the difference really is between a digital twin and maybe standard model-based testing, kind of on modeling, model-driven design and things, is that this becomes a living entity, a model of a system and system interactions, digital interactions through that system. And that is highly complex, right? That's multi-dimensional, and it's kind of, you can look at it from one viewpoint of, I'm a business architect, or I'm actually a customer success manager, or I'm an end user. What does that look like for me? And we can all agree on that digital twin, and we've seen the benefits of digital twins in manufacturing to be able to run experiments against those kind of really complex systems of systems. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is if you're able to bring the knowledge of how your special source and how your system works and how all that legacy, all that inherited knowledge and wisdom. I said this kind of yesterday in the sense of information is just dots of that aren't joined together.
Yeah.
Knowledge is connecting those dots, which then you would have where your humans usually in the loop is the wisdom of seeing where those interactions and the information and the knowledge is overlapped to say that's just not going to work for us, or it's not going to work for our customers. Wisdom, it isn't going to be something you're going to see any kind of AI augmented testing platform bring anytime soon, but it's where the human is in the loop to validate and verify that everything that is being expressed by all stakeholders and all permutations is correct. And we believe in this source of truth of a very unique system and system design. And I think that's really quite exciting because what we talked about, and it's kind of your last point on there was time to value, or total test cost ownership, or any of these terms which we could probably look at, is the value-based testing aspect. Is if you're saying to me, and I had this same conversation with the CTO of a large crowd testing company yesterday, I said, if you're paying crowd testers to write tests, design tests, let's talk about the test design phase for a second, and that's going to take 50% of their time, and then the actual testing aspect, all the additional tertiary activities, which just isn't just test execution and all the other steps. If 50% of your time up front is spent on test design, and these people aren't specialists in the system that you're asking them to test this week, which could be a medical system, for instance, or aerospace and defense, or an automotive IVI system, or a retail app, they're not domain experts. They're going to struggle giving you the correct design, test designs. And I think we've always, unfortunately, from an automation landscape, we've always focused the test execution and test maintenance bit, which is maybe 15-20% of the overall, total amount of cost of testing, right? And I think we need to start changing it because everyone else is releasing faster. We're seeing people like things like Copilot coming in and giving 7-8% improved productivity for developers. We need the same Copilot technology for us. We need the same, acceleration using AI and generative capabilities to give us better test designs, deduplicate tests, avoid over testing, really accelerate some of those tasks, which, typically have been highly manual. And the supporting apps, getting test data, getting environmental management, the whole life cycle, which we've condensed previously and measured really just in tests being executed. And the question is why, right? What's the value in that? What's the value of having 1,000 tests versus 10,000 tests, right? It's so hard to understand coverage. To understand, link that to customer satisfaction scores, link that to your, velocity, and then, the total cost of ownership of maintaining that kind of effort. So, so complicated dimensions. And I think that's where the report tells you a lot about that. That's how it kind of summarizes it at the end. Correct. But also, I think this is what we're asking is, what's the value of what you have today? And if you're just looking at regression testing, and if it's failed before, and you're maintaining these huge test frameworks, these death stars of test frameworks that, are taking huge amounts of time of SDEDs, maintaining them, changing and doing, healing the XPaths and all this kind of manual effort, are you spending the time on the right place when
Correct.
You should be maybe moving into, AI augmented testing and focusing on the human value you can add in to value-based testing?
Well, I think, and on that point, when I think about this from, say, how I kind of think about it in my head is, where's the value for what you're doing, right? Where is the real value? It's at release, isn't it? So you start to gain the value. So realistically, and I've always had this kind of picture in my head of a graph that says, no matter what it is from requirement, a release cycle, maybe you put it into this release sprint, or you put it into this program release cycle, it's all cost. At that point, everything you're doing is you're spending money and you're constantly spending. At some point, you're going to stop spending as much money, and then you're going to try and hit a release date for whatever it is, new functionality, new thing, new application, whatever, right? Update, upgrade. It's all going to be cost. I'm building cost, I'm spending money. When do you get business value? You get business value at release. It then starts to go up above the line in terms of value. So all of this is a cost, sunk cost, and at this point it's value. So to your point, right? And when you look at the metrics that we do from a testing and QA perspective, and you just kind of highlight this, is got 1,000 tests, I'm going to run them. I found 20 defects. Is that good? Well, I've run 1,000 tests, I've found 20 defects. And does that associate itself with business value? Well, it associates the value of testing. I've done some work and I've found some problems. That was what I laid out my testing strategy to be. Oh, great, okay. But actually, someone then has got to go, and they're just, in my mind, they're technical debt, right? Someone's got to go and take those defects and fix them. They're just another set of technical debt, more cost. But the value is when people start using the applications, the services, and the things that we're rolling out. And that, I feel, is one of the, you're going to highlight it, one of the problems we see in QA and testing today is a lot of the way we report it is sunk cost, right? It's how much have I done and how much have I found? And even when we do how much have I done, how much have I found, it's more cost because we've got to fix the problems we found, right? Whereas actually, if you start aligning the value of QA and testing to business value metrics, so you start thinking about what's important to the business, it's CSAT scores, it's customer adoption rates, it's, I don't know, those types of scenarios where you're looking at cost-effective aspects of the business and you start trying to align the process and the cost of that back to that, then you start to really understand the value of quality engineering and testing because it's embedded in your process to get you more value on that after release, on that right-hand side, on the production side of the process, right? And that's like you say, so anything we can do to improve the interface with the business to capture the right things, so we're spending the right time on the right things in that cost cycle, and anything we can do to align the value of what we do with QA engineering to the business value metrics on the right hand side is got to help, because that when you still look at it today, we're kind of, and it is a hard thing to do. It's why you can't do, there's lots of people that have different opinions and different ways to do this, and no one's right or wrong, but when you start to focus on those types of things about how do I engineer in the right way in the front end of that delivery process, that I'm doing the right things at the right time, and then how do I align to what the business wants to see from a value perspective on the right-hand side of that, where suddenly you're saying, well, actually, I'm helping the business to get better adoption. I'm helping the business to retain customers. I'm helping the business to get better customer satisfaction dynamics. Then you're in a different world of a discussion in terms of how you do this stuff. So, and I say AI to me is going to be a game changer in this business. It's going to absolutely realign everyone's thinking towards those paradigms. How do I align better pre-production and how do I align better post-production with business outcomes? If you get that right, I mean, we're taking a 50-year step forward in 2 years with this kind of technology.
Well, and I think that's a great place to summarize that. We've got 2 new product introductions this year. One of them is going to be an AI augmented testing tool, which is, very close to completion. The next 2-3 weeks, it's that exciting, and it does exactly that. No pressure, no pressure to do, but it does exactly that, right? And I think these are exciting times, and we have these hype waves, and sometimes we don't see really the benefit realization of the opposite side of it, right? But what I think you've just nailed with the inverted V model, A model, and which you can't use as a full term, is that we're changing the dynamic, right, completely. And that if you're still in a year's time reporting the amount of tests and the amount of defects based on regression and your highly operational Death Star open source test framework and sunken costs, then you're not adding value-driven testing, and you're not doing value-driven delivery, and you may not be around, in 5-10 years, because the pressure is going to be around, show me what we're adding to it, right? Show us how you are mitigating costs and risk and, providing assurance. around the systems that we trust, and we're seeing now in the news that having an effect on humans, end users, and brands that we trust. And so there's a brave new world. There's a lot of fear, I guess, around AI and how AI is going to change that, but it isn't taking away people's jobs. It's enabling them to have superpowers to do more, and be able to understand more around business and domain and industry and complexity like never before. So massive thanks, Toby, for joining us. I know you're probably going to now be rushing off, flying to Tokyo, and now doing the exact same talk over there in perfect Japanese, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Brushing off on it in the background now. But yeah, no, my pleasure. Great to see you again, and great to talk to everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
Take care.